There is no way around it. Today's gospel lesson, linked in the description below, is a really difficult one. And it shows us Jesus as a human being shaped by his time and culture. Not exactly the transcendent God with us that I would hope and expect to see. That, of course, is the problem when we put people on pedestals. I mean, the second commandment, the one about not making and worshiping graven images, really isn't a bad idea in the sense that when we idealize or idolize someone, they will eventually let us down because their humanity will get in the way. No matter how much good they've done in their life, they will have moments when they mess up, at least according to us. This is Jesus' big moment of humanity, at least the one that got written down. This story comes to us twice in the Gospels, once in Mark and once in Matthew. In Mark, the woman is Syrophoenician, like a cousin of the Israelites. But Matthew chooses to evoke her as a Canaanite. It's a term that only gets used this one time in the whole New Testament. And in the Old Testament, or the First Testament, the Hebrew Bible, Canaanites are deemed worthy of extermination. The way it's written down, God tells Israel to take their land by force and commit genocide to get it. So the late first century Jewish readers Matthew is primarily writing to would have gotten the reference really easily. This woman and her daughter weren't part of the chosen people. They were barely even human. And so she had no right to ask for her daughter to be healed. But Matthew's emphasis on her identity here is really important too, because this is one of the few places in the gospel where Jesus remains pretty passive while someone persists in asking him for help. The parallel here between the Canaanite woman and other unconventionally successful and faithful Canaanite women, Rahab and Tamar in particular, would have been understood immediately by the original hearers of this story. This Canaanite woman who was seen as less than human, who Jesus compares to a dog, persists in her faith that God means to include her and her daughter in the good news that Jesus is bringing too. And in her persistence, she helps Jesus to witness and acknowledge her humanity, her right to exist, and her place in the beloved community. Let's back up just a little though. Jesus had just been lecturing the Pharisees about how it's more important to radiate goodness from within than to engage in ritual hand washing. The Pharisees have been trying to catch Jesus neglecting the law. Jesus has told them that the heart of the law is to make sure that whatever's coming out of us is good and right, rather than worrying about whether we are performing rituals correctly. Yaroslav Pelikan, an American religious historian, wrote, "Tradition is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of the living." Jesus gets caught out by his own traditionalism and refuses to heal this woman specifically because she is a Canaanite. It's the only time he refuses to heal anyone in the Gospels. So this is really significant. That his about face doesn't come from within or from some divine transcendent knowledge or from the voice of God coming from a cloud or something. It is the Canaanite woman's persistence that helps him realize that his impulse to ignore this woman's immediate need based on an age-old dehumanization of all of her people is getting in the way of God's vision, promise, and love for all of God's people. That this woman too is worthy of God's love and healing simply because she is human. Who do we write off? Whose needs do we ignore? How do we blame people for their misfortune as if life weren't precarious for all of us? Jesus is always calling us into a fuller, deeper vision of what it means to be human. And that means acknowledging the humanity of people we've been taught are less than human, sometimes across generations. It means allowing ourselves to imagine what it would be like to be waiting in a refugee camp for years, or being ignored on the street, or being blamed for our own abuse or addiction or disability, or being told by someone with the capacity to help that there's nothing that can be done. What would the world look like if we were able to see ourselves in each other? Jesus, after denying this woman 3 times, first in silence, then with theology, then with an insult, changes his mind. He breaks the rules to help her because he can. And we are also called to do the same. Amen.